Hej, hallå, I'm Kråkan, also known as Corvus Cornix, so welcome to Closet Movie Rambles, where I talk about all the movies that I found in my closet while cleaning. This week's movie is Limelight, and it's part of the Charlie Chaplin collection, and it's about 2 hours and 12 minutes long. And the movie starts to explain that this is a story about a ballerina and a clown, and then cutting to Calavero, played by Charlie Chaplin, this old man, old performer. He's drunk as a skunk and tried to get into his apartment complex. It's kind of funny scene. He just tried to fit the key into the lock and he managed to get in there. So when he gets in there, he smells gas. So he bashes in the door and he finds this ballerina inside. He doesn't know that it's a ballerina yet, but he saves her from the gas because she apparently tried to commit suicide, which will, for a thing that will come up later. So he turns off the gas and he gets, or rather a doctor turns off the gas, and the doctor in Calavero brings the girl up to Calavero's room, which is on the second floor, I believe. And then he talks to the girl a bit and gets some advice from the doctor how to do things. And later he goes out to buy some food for the girl, and he runs into the landlord, this old fat lady that's she doesn't want them to share a room because she's a younger girl and he's an older man, so it makes sense. But he managed to win the landlord's favor over. So later he goes to sleep and he dreams about the good old days, and this is actually kind of a funny sketch. He has like trained fleas. He's on a stage basically in his dream, and there's this two fleas called Henry and Phyllis. And the sketch kind of ends, and we find out later that he lost his spark, and he hasn't really. The audience more or less didn't want to see him anymore. They just stopped watching him. He wasn't funny anymore. Excuse me. And sometime later, the next morning, he talks to the girl. He finds out that her name is Teresa, and later they eat together. And later that night, Calavera has another dream where he's in hobo. Singing about spring, and it's also kind of a theatrical thing because Charlie Chaplin actually wrote all the music and he also performed and sings, and this is one of those few occasions where it's of course a black and white movie, but he speaks. There's sound and music and everything, and it's awesome. It's probably one of my favorite Chaplin movie, to be honest, but yeah. So the next morning, Teresa finds out that she can't use her legs, and there will be something coming up about that too. So at this point, Calavera is acting very positive, and she is being very negative about everything that's been happening. And then Calavera talks about his drinking because when he actually thinks that he's funnier when he drinks for some reason, and that's like a downward spiral, obviously. So Calavera gets a telegram from his agent, and he hasn't seen his agent in a very long time. So he goes to the agent to get a gig, basically. And then he talks to the doctor again about the legs and everything, and it's all in her head, basically. It's psychological, it's not a physical thing. So Calavera talks to Therese about her story, basically her life story, what happened. So she tells him about this former job she had at a store where she was helping out a young composer who didn't have a lot of money to help get extra like sheets for music and whatnot. And one day she actually gave extra change just to be nice, and that got her fired from her job. So the next morning they practice dancing, which is kind of funny. They are trying to dance, and gradually she becomes better and better at walking, and Calavera is supposed to do this job, but the audience doesn't think he's funny, and this is a bit later. And then cutting to like 6 months later, the roles have switched. Now Therese is the positive figure and Calavero is the negative, so they still stay at the same place, and they basically take care of each other. So in the beginning he was taking care of her because she couldn't walk, and now it's the opposite where she takes care of him because he's down and under. So she's dancing in his show, and Calavera is invited to do like a screenplay. So at this screenplay, she's supposed to dance and she's supposed to do this audition. But the funny thing is, she realized that the young composer that got her fired from a job that she actually liked is actually the composer for this play. and she kind of tries to play it off, but in the end things will kind of switch. Another thing that I forgot to mention was when she was doing really good, the ballerina Therese, Calavera was going really deep and down, and he was actually starting to drink again a lot more. But after the show, or the thing that they were doing, Teresa kind of explains to Calavera, and this was kind of a surprise because I forgot this scene. She tells him that she basically is in love with him and she wants to marry him. And obviously Calavera is an old white-haired man and she's a young woman. So this kind of like weird thing is going on. So sometime later, Teresa is eating dinner and she accidentally gets grouped with the composer, and they talk about the past, and she basically tells him that she wants to marry Calavera. And then there is a show, like a silent drama, and Teresa kind of panics on the stage because she believes that her legs are messing up again. And this is one of those moments where I didn't actually agree with Calavera's character, but he actually slaps her in the face so she goes back on the stage. It was kind of unnecessary, but whatever. And after the show, everything went fine, and then they're supposed to have supper again, and then the composer and Teresa are seated next to each other. And Calavera goes out to drink at a bar because I think he actually played like a clown in that scenario, and he didn't get the better end of the deal, I guess. So he's out drinking, and he wakes up in the in the hallway of his own apartment, and outside Teresa and the composer they're arriving by hearse, and they talk about Calavera basically. So the next morning, Calavera and Therese talks about love, and later Calavera packs up his stuff and leaves. Teresa starts to tour the world, and the composer actually gets drafted into the war. So Calavera becomes this street performance, and one day he wanders into a bar, and he actually finds his like old boss and this and the composer, and they talk about what happened. And Calavera is actually happy about his new life because now he can actually live for the day and everything. And I think that's what he wanted from the beginning, because he's actually happy. And then later Teresa actually finds Calavera, and it's kind of a sad moment together. So Teresa kind of puts on a show for Calavera for like one last performance. So he has a bad feeling about this, and in the rehearsal room he's actually drinking. And he's right to be feeling kind of suspicious about the whole thing, because it's all planned so that he will feel good about the whole situation. So the audience is kind of rigged in this situation. They're meant to laugh at his show. So he does his show and the audience laughs, and apparently the show is so good that they actually laugh for real, and he put on an encore. And during the musical number, he plays the violin so fast that he falls down into like a drum, the outstage, and he hurt his back. And the audience obviously think it's part of the show, and they laugh, and he gets carried out. And apparently his spine is broken or damaged. So they carry the drum out on stage, and he says basically that I'm stuck and I can't really perform the whole thing. Like a real trooper, just carrying all the pain and everything. And then he gets carried off stage, and the show goes on. And a doctor checks up on him, and apparently he's not doing too well. So the composer and Teresa gets into the room as well, and they have a talk about the whole situation. And then they just want the show to go on, I guess. So she goes out to dance, and Calavera says, like, I want to see her dance for the last time. And it's kind of a really, really sad situation. They actually carry him out so he can see her performance, but he actually passes away before she even starts to dance. And that's the end of the movie. So what do I think about Limelight? I think it's one of the better, if not the best, Charlie Chaplin movie I've seen. It has a lot of humor, it's a lot of negative and positives. At the end of the movie, you almost start to root for Calavera as a character, that he will get his redemption, he gets his last show, and the people actually like what he's doing, and the one thing he wants to see at the end, is to see this girl, dance, and he doesn't survive the whole ordeal. I know a lot of people think that Charlie Chaplin is all about comedy, but it's one thing I realized while watching this box and other box sets about Charlie, is that there is a little bit of sadness, but also a little bit of humor in there. I think he put it back. I think he said something like there will be a little tears and a little laughter. at the end, you know. And at this point, I always forget the ending, and I almost tear up every time because it's like, you know, so sad. You know, he became an alcoholic, and he, you know, just trying to do what he loved, and you know, you can't be a star forever and whatnot. So, do I recommend this movie? Absolutely, but I don't think that you will see it. That's the best way of putting it. I don't think it airs on TV or any services, so probably the only way you can get this thing is on like a box set or like in a discount bin or something. So anyway, thanks for listening and or watching, and take care.